Hello, everyone, and welcome to an exciting new episode of the StudioMEcast. I am your host, Peter, but today I actually kind of have a bit of a co-host here. This isn't your regular guest. You see, sitting beside me here in the podcast lounge here at the good old Studio Me is Maria, and Maria is actually also a manager of Studio Me. Additionally to that, or preceding that, she is a motion graphics animator, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, is animation in general. And I'll kick us off here in a second, but Maria, thanks for filling in today as my guest.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, so yeah, because we've got a lot of guests coming up. You know, we don't have a shortage of guests, although if you want to be on, maybe send us an email. That'd be cool. But we've got a lot of guests lined up in the future, and I've got a list, and pretty much all of the ones, like, I've got a lot that I'm recording next week. But this week, everybody got, pushed back, and so I turned to Maria. I'm like, hey, we have an interesting conversation every once in a while.
Yes.
And we have one planned for our listeners today. So... Yes. Kicking off with animations, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the viability of animation as a career, and the context of that being, in our experience, we both went to Edinboro University, and I went there as a film major, and Maria went there as a animation major with a focus in traditional animation. But one of the things, there's a lot of overlap in those departments. The professors all know each other. The students frequent each other's classes a lot. The filmmakers have to take an animation class. The animators have to take a video class, So we know each other. That's how we met. And one of the things that happens, I feel, a lot with animation is the same thing that can happen with filmmaking or music or like being a rock star or something, which people will have an idea of, like, they want to become an animator, and they'll think specifically, oh, I want to be a Disney animator. Like with filmmaking, like, oh, I want to make blockbuster movies or something like that. But then when they get more into it, they might see, like, oh, this is what it actually takes to be a Disney animator versus the rewards that you might get with that, or whatever. Like, people can get really disillusioned, but a lot of the misconception that people will get is that there aren't tons of options for animation or filmmaking or media in general, where some people have this idea that if you're not a rock star and you're a musician, you must be starving. And that's just not true. I know many, many musicians who make a good living all year round, doing all kinds of stuff with their music. And the same is true for animation. Just, about to pass it to you here for a second, but my experience has been, although I know a bunch of successful animators, through the art program, I saw a lot of people who also kind of washed out. They came in, a lot of it was honestly, they liked watching cartoons.
Yep.
And so they thought that must mean they like making cartoons.
Yes.
And then they got into doing it, and they didn't want to sit there for 10 hours and animate.
It takes a lot to essentially discipline yourself to be like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and draw for 10 hours, but it's not gonna be like 100 different drawings. No, it's going to be 100 different drawings of the same thing.
Yes, that's it. And especially when you're starting out, you don't have other animators doing like in-betweens for you if you're doing key poses, which is actually just another one of those possible gigs that's out there. If you're gonna, like, there's so many different things with animation.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
You've got being a character animator, but then there's also character design, and then there's backgrounds, and there's for 3D animation, there's like rigging, and then there's also modeling and all this stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, if you started in one place, where you've migrated, how you've kept certain interests, where your interests have expanded or moved, where'd your spark start, and how'd you get to be doing what you're doing here at the studio these days?
So I started, like everybody else, watching cartoons very, very young and being like, oh, this is awesome. This is so colorful and amazing. And I was getting older, and I was getting to the point where like a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, cartoons are for kids. Like, why are you still watching cartoons?" And I'm like, but I want to be a kid forever. Like, adults are boring. Like, if you're not like having like kid like intentions whenever you're older, it's like, what are you having fun as an adult? But as I got older, I was around like 6th grade, I started watching this show called Avatar: Last Airbender. Very good show. I recommend everybody watch it. And I was, at that time, I would watch like behind the scenes for like Disney DVDs. Like they would have the extra DVDs, and I would watch behind the scenes. And I watched like behind the scenes for like Avatar, and like Nickelodeon would always like put up stuff like, oh, this is how you draw so and so, or like, oh, this is like what I do, and this man is like 35, and I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds like fun. You get to be a kid literally for the rest of your life, and you get to draw. That sounds amazing. So up until, well, continuing into now, but that's whenever I started teaching myself how to draw, and like I was like, I need to be better. I need to be better. And I actually didn't take any art classes until high school, because all of my art classes in grade school were just like, oh, arts and crafts time. But so I started taking more like drawing classes in high school, and then I was like, yeah, you know what? I really, really want to pursue this. Going into like animation, getting more into that, because I feel like I'm well developed artistically, and not really at the time, but
But perhaps for relatively for speaking, at least for people who hadn't like in the age range before art school.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one of the things that if you're like a high school prodigy, by the way, and then you go to an art program, what you'll find out is that talent gives you a head start, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
Like you might think you know how to draw, but if you've learned how to draw, oh, I just do it. I just draw what feels right.
And you're like the best one in your class. It's like
Mom puts your pictures on the fridge.
Chip on my shoulder. Yeah. You know, it's like I did this thing.
That stuff's great and wonderful, but there is so much more to learn.
Yes.
And it's lovely. So
yes, there is.
But anyway, so you eventually went to Edinboro.
Eventually, I chose to go to Edinboro. And once I got there, I, like everybody else, wanted to just dive headfirst into animation. But with Edinboro's program, they are definitely more along the lines of like, oh, you can come from like any type of background, and we can help you get your fundamentals up to par to go into whatever you want to go into. For animation, it was taking a bunch of drawing classes before my second semester, where I actually took my first animation class. So I
think that's also really wise with that program. Also, we're speaking, by the way, like in case posterity is listening to this, we're speaking of the program as it was when we were there.
Yeah.
Just like when we say the show Avatar: Last Airbender, we mean the original animated show. We can't vouch for the live action one that hasn't come out yet. Yeah. Anyway,
we're not getting into that.
Stay positive. Stay positive. All right. So, but yeah, it's really interesting how my experience, same as yours, with the art program was like I felt like I knew what I wanted to do.
Yes.
And I happened to be right about that.
Yeah.
You know, but. The reality is, I think I'm not even going to say most, but many people aren't right about what they are going to want to do, or even what they're going to be able to do. It doesn't always go the way that you think it will when you're first entering college.
And that's life. That's life for you.
But having those foundations help you to be prepared for if you do pivot what your focus is. Like most people who go into animation, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of them go into thinking, oh, I want to animate all the main characters.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
But then you get there and eventually you realize, oh, I actually have a passion for landscape.
Yes.
Like doing the backgrounds for like the environments people are in. Like, and you might even realize, oh, I'm less taken with the characters and more fascinated by the world that's created.
And the opposite of that, you can actually start with, like, for me, for instance, I was mainly for like character design and stuff like that. And that kind of changed as I was in college, and I was like, okay, well, I was thinking job-wise, like what would be better suited, what's the need in animation, and at the time it was storyboarding, and I was like, okay, well, I'll pursue storyboarding. And so when I graduated, I wanted to pursue that more, and also adhering to the style that I was told that would be the best way to go about animation, which was like the more cartoony style and less of the anime style. And now that has kind of changed, because after a bit of storyboarding on my own, and like working with other people with storyboards and getting feedback, I ended up being like, you know what, storyboarding isn't for me. Like, I like every single aspect of animation, the pre-production, the production, and the post-production. So like trying to have me like just do one thing and then hand it off to somebody else doesn't really feel right to me. I feel like I should be a part of every single step. So like that's how I was like, yeah, you know what, storyboarding's not for me. And there are a lot of people who wear their storyboardings for them, and I respect them highly for it, because it's tough.
A lot of animated films even will be storyboarded before they write a script.
Yes.
Which I think is something that a lot of filmmakers should consider doing, like live action filmmakers should consider doing, because it's a great way to, like, even if it's just an exercise, to think more visually. I've found it immensely helpful. Even like when I wrote a film and then there were going to be a lot of VFX in it and all this, and I was pitching it to people as I was making it, I ended up storyboarding everything that I hadn't shot yet. And that ended up being a huge help just with communicating with the entire cast on what this film was supposed to even be like. So like, being able to see your film before you make it is a huge advantage. Some people, I forget the name, there was like an ad for a master class course series, and the guy said, storyboards are for cowards. And I was like,
what?
Yeah, well, you don't work with animation, so shut up a little bit. I don't know. And,
it doesn't.
I mean, I get it, but I try to not knock other people's way of approaching their art.
Yes, no, and
that's not true. I have opinions. Sorry.
I mean, I do too, but there's art is subjective.
I disagree.
But before we
get into
that,
someday we'll have an episode that's all about my topic of the thing that I know is true that absolutely nobody agrees with me on, which is that art is not subjective, period. We can go into that some other time, maybe, or I will with some, I don't know. But that's a belief system that I have that I've never met anybody who shares. Like, even, well, no, I kind of believe that. And we talk for a minute, and then 30 seconds in, they're like, no, but it is subjective here. I'm like, no, it isn't. And I'm like, yeah, that nobody agrees with me so far. I'm not trying to start a cult. Anyway, it's like, dividing your time up between like two of them would be, anyhow. So we've got, trudging right along through this tangent that I've created for us here.
Yes.
you do originally when you were hired here at the studio, it was mostly with a focus on being a motion graphics animator.
Yes.
Just real quick, paragraph, if you can you tell people what a motion graphic animator is?
I could probably just do it in one sentence. It literally taking assets on screen and just moving them. That is the basic of what I do, where I just take text. Oh, we want to put text on a screen. Boom. There it is. It's in your video now.
I think that's a good definition, but to not sell Maria short here, we also, so actually, for those of you loyal, joiners of the show, have actually enjoyed, I hope, some of Maria's work already. She created the lower third animations that we have. The intro, outro animation things. Those all fall under motion graphics. So a lot of you probably know, but in case you didn't, that's just an example. You've seen it your whole life at this point. But there you go.
That's pretty much it.
Now, as far as kind of bouncing this back as like animation and like what you can do with it and stuff. Not that we're recruiting people for like to be like, oh, like, you start a career in animation, but I think kind of an angle that I'd like to sort of take a lot of this on is sort of like an optimistic, hopeful thing where it's like, hey, there's more. It's still competitive.
Oh, yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah, but there's more opportunities than a lot of people, I think, realize.
And I think there's more opportunities now than there were whenever, like, I was in high school.
100%.
Like,
absolutely.
Especially with social media and everything. Like, we've had a few guests on here that have created their own, like, essentially business online. Just creating art. Just Paul was the first one that comes to mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Old friend of the show.
Yes.
For an episode there.
Super cool.
And even just for like, one of the best things I ever did for my career as a filmmaker was to become an expert in After Effects.
Yes.
And I did that at Edinboro. But that. Apart from the fact that helped me to become a better artist, it shaped the way that I think. And as someone who likes to work with department heads on different projects, it's like it helps me to understand animation and animation softwares and like the differences between like, 3D, 2D, all that, and this and the overlap to be able to communicate with people that have a complicated vision come to fruition.
Yeah.
But also just so aside from like becoming a better artist, better craft, all that, that was a big selling point for me when I applied for the gig here. Honestly, was when they found out like, oh, do you do After Effects? I'm like, I do After Effects all the time. And they're like, oh, well, we could really use someone who does After Effects more. And that was definitely a thing I had going for me there. So there's like having a skill set like with After Effects or an animation software, because you can do motion graphics in After Effects. In case people don't know,
that's mainly what I use is After Effects,
and it's very accessible to learn as well. I mean, I think it used to be more accessible than other things to learn, but I think a lot of other things softwares have caught up. Like if you want to learn how to do Blender, there's I forget his name. I'm sorry. Whatever your name is, an Australian fella who just goes over Blender. You can learn all about Blender from this guy. He's amazing. The reason why I don't know his name is because I've only watched the first episode or two, because I'm behind on learning Blender. But for After Effects, there was videocopilot.net. What's up? Andrew Kramer here with another exciting tutorial from videocopilot.net. I owe him a lot of money someday.
We are not sponsored by him.
No, we're not, and we're not sponsored by any of these people.
Nobody.
But if we could be sponsored by one thing, it would be Bigelow Earl Grey tea. And so there's anyway, I drink it all day, every day. Anyhow.
Anyways.
So we really ought to get sponsors someday, even though this is the studio run.
It's the studio run.
But I don't know. We'll get into how to get a sponsorship for your podcast another time, because there are a lot of the people who actually get their podcasts done here at the studio get sponsors, and it's more attainable than you might think it is. Speaking of things that may be more attainable than you think they are, getting back to it, just like
getting back to animation,
having our main point. A lot of people go in because they're like, I want to be a Disney animator.
Yeah.
And then some people give up because they think like, oh, this is going to be too hard, which something like, oh, that's too difficult is not a reason to give up on your dreams. Let me say that first. Number one. Number two, there is something to be said for, oh, I could do that, but the amount of work it would take just isn't worth it.
Yeah.
I'd rather do something else and spend more time with my family or watching movies or whatever.
And there could be a lot of other factors into it as well. You could also like love animation and do it all day, every day. But if you are in the wrong company or just not having the right people around you, that can really put a damper in your dream. It can basically kind of shoot it out of the air. And like from what I've seen through the animation industry, being in California, it varies. Some studios treat their animators and like concept artists, what have you, really, really well. But there are others that completely work them into the ground, and so-called creative burnout can happen. And that's why unions are coming up for animation in California, which, woo.
There's also been, some people have this concept of how Disney, like just using Disney as an example, of how these big animation studios must work. Like, oh, if I became an animator there, then I'd be set. It's like, well, actually, the way that a lot of these things work is like you and I both have met a bunch of people who have worked on Disney films.
Yes.
But saying you're a Disney animator isn't necessarily incorrect, but there's like that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean you worked on a project with Disney. Yeah. Because they can have an insane turnover rate depending on what department you're in, and so it's like there's plenty of animators who like, oh, I've worked with Disney. Yes. But the rest of the time they do other stuff.
They do other things. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially younger people who are like kind of just getting into animation, is that a lot of the career of animation is going from one gig to the next. And it's basically like if you were a musician just trying to find the next gig to play. Like you'll have like this project set up for maybe a month. And then you don't know what you're going to be doing after that. Like you don't know where your money's going to be coming from after that. And there are other ways that people have combated with that, where nowadays people can do that because of getting back to like social media and just having your own business, Twitch streaming, like we were just talking about that earlier. Like it can really help to put out your own business as well as doing your career.
And I would also say that just about every successful animator I've ever met had, if I knew them in college, they had something in common, which was an animation course is not a kind of course that you can show up and do the assignments and ace them and that's enough.
Yeah, no.
You need to be doing more things. Aside from doing this is my belief and what I've seen as far as who's gone on to do more stuff, is aside from the projects that they did in school, they were all like for school. They also had their personal projects they were doing, even if it's just like they're messing with their sketchbook, or they're working on a short film on the side or something like that. Or over the summer, they're actually improving their skill set. Yeah. And getting like back to also just kind of pursuing the idea of the opportunities that there are in things like animation. It's like whether people realize it or not, we're surrounded by animation all the time.
Oh,
it's like
every day.
Every TV show, even if it's just a reality show or something, or like a talk show, morning show. There's animations everywhere. Like there's animation all over sports.
Yes.
Okay. There's like
all over it.
you go to the Pittsburgh Pirates. There is a guy whose job, or gal, I think I forget her name. I haven't met her, but she does. Last time I checked, she does the animations for the Jumbotron.
Yeah.
You know, like that's her gig.
Yeah.
And I met I've met people who work with them, you know, and it's like there's so many like odd corner opportunities that you might not realize, like, oh, that can be a regular job. Like a buddy of mine, great 3D animator, he models like I believe it's like outdoor furniture stuff. He does 3D models of it, and like we'll show like, oh, here's an animated display of like what this could look like, and he creates the assets. He makes the chairs, the umbrellas, and all that kind of thing, and outside of that, he's working on personal projects and films, and he's doing all kinds of things, and it's awesome, you know? But it's like, he's able to put groceries on the table. He makes himself a living, but he's also doing these other things that maybe he finds more artistically gratifying.
Exactly.
And with any type of animation, there's that thing of like, you know, it's my impression and belief of it at the moment is that you do need to be doing more stuff outside that. It's not even just like, oh, you need to do more work. But if you have a job that isn't artistically fulfilling, it's a really good idea to work on something that is artistically fulfilling outside of that, even if it's just for a little bit. Yeah. You know, just to keep doing the thing that makes you love your job, you know?
Yeah.
And
and keeping up to date with, like, new things as well also helps out. But getting back to like the different like areas of where you can go with animation, like it's not just cut and dry. Oh, well, do hand-drawn animation. Like it's more than that. It mainly now it's like After Effects animation, which goes into what's called a puppet rig. That's kind of like stop motion. Honestly, it's derived from stop motion, and then stop motion itself. Like there's so many different avenues within just those three things. It's insane.
And you can mix and match them.
Exactly.
Like you can hand draw an asset that you put into After Effects, and then you turn into a motion graphic.
Yes.
And that's not unusual, uncommon, or anything.
No,
you know,
like not at all. And like there's just like so many different avenues that you can take with those two. Like we said before, with just 2D animation in general, and 3D combining that is like concept art. Like concept art, drawing out like what the backgrounds are going to be, drawing out the characters, like actually creating the characters, and having some say in it.
Modeling them and rigging them are two different jobs.
Yes.
But the person modeling it should probably know how rigging works.
Yes.
Just like when you're doing, you know, from especially having some like a character design for 2D animation, you don't just draw a cool character. You have to think about how this can move.
Yes.
You know, and, you know, where the weight is going to be.
Especially if it's not going to be a humanoid. Like, if it's just something really out there. Like, first thing that comes to mind is, like, the Pokemon Grimer. Like, how is Grimer going to move? Like, he's not really humanoid. He's just, like, a pile of muck. Like, just kind of thinking like that. And then, like, going off of that, like, going into, like, modeling. Texturing is also another aspect that you can just do texturing. That's what one of my buddies does. He does mainly the textures. Amazing modeler. Like, he does his own models on his own time. But like his main job is doing textures for these 3D models. And like it's super cool. And then animating itself is a completely separate thing. Like there's so many different aspects of just actually animating. Like you got your keyframes, you got your in-between frames, you got your cleanup animators. Like there's just so much, and it's more than just the actual animation bit. Like for me personally, keyframing is like my favorite thing to do because it's so general and you get the basic motion from keyframes. For those who don't know, keyframing is you're essentially having one frame and going to the next big motion and then the next big motion. And
you're not drawing all the stuff in here. It's like 1 and maybe 2 and then 3.
Yeah.
But then you have someone else come in and they do all the
in-betweens, so it makes it like smoother like this. If you're watching.
Yeah.
But
unless you're a student or, you know, there are people who do more than one gig, but it is true that any of the positions that we've talked about, there are people who do that one thing full time.
Yes.
And which is just, you can see how like this just keeps turning into a hydra of, you know, you have a person who just completes their own films by themselves or their own projects, you know, or freelances more or less alone. But then you also have like, oh, I'm in an animation department, or even just like, look, at this point, I think every marketing department probably has an animator.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they're outsourcing to an animator or they have an in-house animator, it's just so everybody needs text on the screen at some point in their
It's just like
lives.
how every marketing department has a designer. Like you just need it. And like it's amazing how many things can just cross over like that. Like I know a lot of animators bouncing from that. I know a lot of animators that have bounced to illustration. Myself kind of being one of them. I'm still animating, but like I'm also an illustrator freelancing. So like where you can take your artistic abilities is also something you have to like think about.
Another big industry, like we often think about this from like film and video and all that, but another huge industry that is, you know, full of animation is video games. You know, it's like there's tons of animation jobs because just about every job we talked about with like if you're compositing or you're like you work with light or animation, rigging, modeling, character design, you know, well, all that stuff is in video games as well, which is a massive industry. And so it's like, while these are competitive positions, they are there. And someone's got to do them. And even if like, whether you're looking to go for a big video gaming company or even just like get on to a smaller gaming company, because that's the other thing that's becoming so much more accessible, where it's like in fact my friend the animator who I talked about earlier, he's designed a game like he's made himself, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, well, at some point I'll have Jesse on here to talk about all this stuff, and he can plug his game and all that, and we'll talk about more animation. But you know, there's whether you're now, a lot of the time, even though there's all these positions, do you find that animators tend to, like, do you think there's sort of a more of a leap for animators to stop working alone as compared to maybe filmmaking? Because filmmaking is like, you can't do anything without other people.
Yeah, no.
Animation, a lot of the time, starts just in the sketchbook when you're alone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
If you are the type of person who is just animating by yourself in your room, like you're creating your own like little short or whatever, like it's completely different than actually working with a team, where like you have so many other people doing like 10 different things, where it's it can be a little bit daunting at times, especially whenever you're used to having your hand in everything, and then all of a sudden you don't have your hand in everything. Like, you're kind of just following people and like following what you're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of people like me that I don't mind that. I really don't. Like, it's not that I like being told what to do, but it's more like, okay, well, this is my job, and this is what I'm going to be doing, so I'm going to finish it to the best of my ability. And if, like, tweaks need to be made, and stuff like that. But with just making your own shorts and stuff, like, it can be nice at times to just be like, okay, I have complete control over this. I don't have anybody else like getting all their little messy fingers all over my stuff. But I do think that you need that interaction with another animator, another artist, another director, like anybody who has like that creative outlook. Like, for instance, every time I create a new illustration, I have my husband look at it because I need fresh eyes. He knows the artistic process, but he himself isn't like a visual artist. So having him look at it and tell me what is wrong with it really helps. So like, that goes to say, like, if people want to do like their own thing, have other people behind you to look at your stuff, be willing to look at your stuff, and give you good feedback, a good constructive critique. That's the word I was looking for.
People who are going to be honest, whether it's, and you're not just looking for people to say that they don't like it, because you'll always be able to find someone who says that.
Yes.
But who can articulate what isn't working, even if it's for them, even though art isn't subjective. But
maybe we'll get into that.
I think that's a good point. Like, definitely, that was something that became very apparent my first year of art school, was that a lot of people had never had anything close to a critique.
Oh my God.
And I had one professor, brilliant, who I ended up taking more classes with than I needed to because I wanted to learn more from this guy.
Yes.
And he would try to get us to fight. It was like, that feeling you get when someone's trying to get two animals to fight each other, and you're like, no, this is so wrong.
Pokemon.
Exactly. Yeah. But we'd all put our
reference.
work on the wall for a critique, and then he'd be like, all right, who's this one, and so, oh, that's mine. And he'd say to somebody else, like, oh, what do you think of this piece? Do you think it shows balance? Because we're supposed to show, like, it's for 2D design, and it's like, okay, we need to create something that shows asymmetrical balance.
Yeah.
And the person, well, I'm not sure that he completely, like, I like it, but I'm not sure that it completely exemplifies asymmetry. And the professor would go, hey, he says that your work is terrible and that you should quit art school. How do you feel about that? And so but it actually got to a point where another student and I had a talk, and we're like, look, these critiques, we're not getting enough out of them. People really need to start giving feedback, so maybe we can pretend to fight. Mm-hmm. And so we'd put each other's work on the wall, and then we'd start being like more aggressive with it. It'd be like, what were you thinking when you did this? Whatever. And it's sort of,
what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think it's,
were you okay?
And just be like, so the assignment was actually for symmetry this time, not asymmetry. So, what do you feel like you accomplished? And stuff. And just like trying to be constructive with it, but we also putting a few zingers in there, I guess, for the lulls. And but that helped, I think, to get the rest of the class to speak up, because that's the thing. People have opinions about your work a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And
People have their opinions. They will tell you it.
Or
you ask for it.
Well, sometimes they won't, though, right?
That's very true. That is very true.
But
I'm just speaking internet.
Yeah.
Wise,
It's not typical. Oh, well, that's, yeah, okay. Fair enough. But it's not necessarily a good thing for people to be indifferent to your work.
Yeah.
It's not always good to. Some people are like, well, any reaction is a good reaction. That's not true. Yeah. But people have been killed over this stuff. So oh well, at least he reacted. But not that you were in the wrong for making a piece of it, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, it's and I've certainly created stuff that had a very negative reaction to it.
Yeah.
Which is a story I'll tell you all about some other time.
Maybe.
But it's basically saying you need honest feedback from other people, even if you're not working with them, and also being able to sift through the feedback. Like if a few people say the same thing that you don't want to admit, like if they say, if 5 different people tell you, I really just don't care about the main character, then you need to be aware that a lot of people aren't don't care about your main character. If your character's not supposed to be likable, then maybe they just don't get that. And because that's something that everybody says they understand, but a lot of people don't recognize. Because it's like they think, oh, well, I'm not having a good time watching this, so there must be something wrong with it. But you're not always supposed to enjoy watch. Like, you don't put Schindler's List on because the guys are over. Hey, let's put it on. You're not supposed to enjoy that film.
No,
you're not.
And
but to use an extreme example,
but it's also to get good to get more than just one person's aspect on something, because let's say like this hypothetical person who created this script and they didn't like the main character, but you have like 2 other people who read it that actually do like the main character, and like they kind of get it a little bit better than the other person did. That's also something to take into consideration.
Absolutely.
When you're being critiqued. So having just more people to show is always better than just, even one person is better than showing nobody, but like having that essentially survey pool of people being like, okay, well, I felt this way or I felt that way while reading this thing or looking at this piece of art or watching this animation, anything really, like just having just a few extra sets of eyes to look at it or listen to it or what have you helps out so much. That's why I tend to put my artwork, not just my husband, because he's also not an artist, so what does he know? Sometimes I think that. But I also show like a few,
Get that back.
a few of my artist friends. And that has happened a few times where I'm like, I really like this face. And he's like, I hate it. And I'm like, but I like it. And no, it's not working. And I'm like,
it's not working. I can't tell you why, but it's not. Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah. It really is annoying when they're 100% right.
Yeah. Oh my God. And
but you got to take it.
He normally is.
Yeah.
And it crushes.
I also now
me.
An interesting way to get feedback as well, because that's another thing. People say, "Oh, get feedback," but then it can be difficult to get honest feedback. You got to find those people.
Yeah.
And also, you don't want to overload them. If you make something and change it just a little bit, don't send it to them after that.
No.
It's like that's something I used to with my fiance. I would be like editing a film, and it's in a stage where it's like each different cut has like one of the shots is a little different, and it's like, a 14-minute film, and I'd want her to watch the whole thing in context. Again. Because I was in quarantine and didn't know how people worked for a minute there because I forgot. And I'd be like sending it to her repeatedly, like, oh, how about this? How about this? How about this? And her reaction, of course, like gets less and less like, oh wow, you're so good at making movies, and more like, yeah, it's all right, it's cool.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, you don't like it, I mean, I think it's great, or I think it's terrible, or whatever.
Or I like change one line of like my art piece, and after I showed Zach the first time, and he's like, "What's different?"
Yes.
I'm like, it's this line. He's like,
weren't you looking at it the first time?
And then I have to like undo it so they can.
And you're like, oh, geez, no one notices. Anyway, but
Anyways.
but another like, okay, so getting feedback, finding people, don't overload them, and then also another thing that I find exceptionally helpful, I know you can relate to this, is when you can, watch it with the person that you want feedback from, because you might not even need them to say anything, because you will watch a completely different project or see a different picture when you're not like, headphones on working on it for 6 hours or whatever. It's like you sit down with someone else and they watch it, and suddenly you see like, oh, that joke isn't funny, or oh, this isn't working, or oh, that's confusing, and you find yourself trying to like, you'll want to jump in and say, okay, so for this part, this happens. And then they're trying to pay attention to you and they don't see anything. And it's like, but the other thing is, when people give you feedback that you have asked for, take the notes and don't try to explain what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Even if they're just wrong. Okay. If someone says like, I was really confused as to the relationship between these two people. And then you want to say, in the opening scene, they say, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you, my sister, for a long time. And they just missed it or whatever.
Or something. Yeah.
And it's like that kind of thing. It's them,
Yeah.
It's not, and that's like, you try to be objective.
Yeah. I'm guilty of it sometimes.
Yeah, but it's like, and when people say something like that, don't say, oh, well, in the opening scene, they, say this is happening. Like, just don't do that. That doesn't mean never defend your work.
Yeah, no. I'll defend your work. Defend it.
Yeah.
But don't be like in the middle of it. Hey, this is, don't you get it? Like, this is what this is going, if they don't get a joke or something.
Jackie Chan has a brilliant thing they talked about one time, which was, when you're making a movie, the audience only cares good movie, bad movie. He's like, are you going to go to every movie theater and say, oh, well, it was raining that day, so we couldn't get it exactly right. So this person, he's like, no, they don't care.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't matter.
It really
the amount
doesn't.
of amazing things that are accomplished by incredible people in movies that people just don't like, is kind of amazing. It's like, you go back and you look at some movies and you're like, this would have changed the world if it came out 50 years ago, and now we're like, doesn't make it unamazing, doesn't mean they don't put thousands and thousands of work hours into the thing. But ultimately, an audience or a client or anybody else is like, for the most part, is it good or not? And they might not even be able to define good or not or whatever, but they'll know it when they see it. And also, don't go fishing for compliments with your stuff. Like, if someone loves the thing you showed them, they will tell you.
Be humble about
most
it.
of the time. It's like, if you have to ask someone like, well, did you like it? That's putting you both in an awkward situation. Even if they're just a more stoic person and they did actually like it. But if you say like, did you like it? And then they go, oh yeah, I liked it. Okay, they might have thought it was all right. But it's also, don't set yourself up for that, because it just makes it uncomfortable, and they're also not gonna want to give feedback as and you know what, it might be a long time before you make anything that anybody likes at all. But if someone really loves something or really hates it, most of the time you won't have to ask them too much. Like, I don't, like, if I go to a film festival and my film is good, people, like, I don't have to be like, oh, did you like my film?
Yeah,
You know, like,
no.
they will go up to me,
Yeah,
you
they'll
know?
go out of your way to
Yeah.
say, hey, I really liked this.
And I do that too.
Yeah.
It's like if I see a film, I'm like, wow, that thing's a killer. I love it. And like
That's-
and the filmmakers go up at the end or whatever. I'm like, okay, they did that. I'll go up to them a lot of the time and just be like, you can't get to everybody. So if I didn't go up to you, don't read into it, please. Jeez. But yeah, but no, I love doing that. It's like going up to someone, telling them exactly what I liked about their work, like not just saying, oh, I just thought it was so moving. Like I try to tell them, like, the way that you did this, which really worked and I thought was awesome, and I think when some of the best compliment you can kind of get is when someone who is a professional is looking at it as an audience member.
Yeah.
And that's not saying like, oh, I get that a lot. I just mean like that's how I look at it. Like if some friends of mine were in a play, all right, and a lot of the time I'll talk technical shop with them and acting and all that.
Yeah.
But for that thing, I just went up, I was like, I really enjoy this. and I get into some of them like, oh, this made me think of this and that and
yeah.
But it also is like I wasn't looking at it so much from the perspective of directing, which isn't a bad thing to do either way. But I was able to quite easily enjoy it. And like as like you might say on the surface level, even though that's like sort of the whole point, But I don't know. I may have contradicted myself in there a little bit with saying like, oh, I try to tell people exactly what, but the best compliment is when you just say it's awesome.
It's awesome.
So one of those, I'm still figuring stuff out. But yeah, I think, so we've gone over a bunch of cool things today. Viability, like just a lot of options for animation. It's like, look, there is more out there than just being a Disney animator.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who have worked with Disney as animators. There's also smaller animation studios. There's marketing departments. There's, construction companies. There's all kinds of things that sports, whatever.
Yeah.
Have and need and use animation all the time. There's freelance.
And they could also be better to work for.
That is true as well. And that's something that is really hard for people to understand.
Yep.
But, I think the part of the thing with like, oh, working with the big animation studios, that's the first thing that like, I guess you notice or fall in love with or hear about. It's like when you're a kid, you might think, oh, I'm going to be a firefighter or an astronaut. It's like, well, those are the jobs you know about.
Yes.
It's like, that doesn't mean you can't be passionate or like have fulfillment in something that you only learn about as an adult.
Yeah.
It's like your childhood dreams are awesome when if they come true and all that, if that's something that actually makes you happy. But there's plenty of people that have like, oh, I want to do I want to be, when we were younger, the pinnacle of success was like, oh, being a rock star. Like that's what people would say.
Yeah.
Now most young people, when you ask them, I forget where this statistic came from, but apparently the most popular like dream profession is being a streamer. And it's like, well, I think it's for the same reasons why being a rock star was. It wasn't even necessarily because people want to practice for hours in a studio without an audience there.
Oh yeah, no. It's the fame of it.
Yeah,
it's the fame of it.
Yeah, or or somewhere around that.
Yeah,
and it's, but yeah, with animation, there's like it is competitive. There's and for any job, there's a bunch of people going after it.
Yes,
but there's so many options out there.
Yes.
And it definitely is a needed practice.
Yeah.
Like you'll be able to tell if people stop doing animation. You're like, where's all the pretty colors? Where's the text? Where's this? Where's that?
Where are the special effects? Special effects are animations as well.
Right.
Like it's all needed, and don't sell yourself short if you're looking into animation. Like, if you think you might be more well-suited for doing, like I said before, doing special effects than actually animating characters and stuff like that. Go for special effects. There is a need for special effects artists. Like, you will be above and beyond if you could do special effects. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and it is very wide of where you can put those talents into, like doing just a small commercial for a small company. Like, you can do that with special effects. And it's just, yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, but
that's it. But yeah, the special effects, and even just another example of this whole kind of thing. We had a previous episode with the special effects artist for like practical effects, Jen McCormick. I worked with her; she's wonderful, and she, her job now is she makes hyper realistic cadavers for medical students to like operate on and all that. It's like she also does like films and like the gore and the horror and all that.
Yeah.
But it's like that's a skill set that I didn't even realize. Like it seems so obvious when she said it. Like, oh yeah, I work in the medical industry. You know.
Yeah, I can do this as well.
Yeah,
like,
and but same with animation. It's like it's not just the archetypal Disney animator thing.
It's being like so creative that like you're going to get creative burnout. Like I know, for me, that's something I don't want, and I'm always scared of because I'm like, I don't want that.
A lot of animators get burned out.
Yes,
like a lot of people, very talented animators who are great and actually genuinely love it. They get into like their late 20s, I think, is where like there's this huge drop off that happens where they're just like, I did it enough, and it's time to take up woodworking.
Yes,
and, which is another noble profession. So, all right, so I think we're just getting about ready to wrap up here.
Mm-hmm.
We've kept it with animation and all that. I think it would be really cool if we close with like maybe 2 little bits of advice, one from each of us. For me, I can like if, like a piece of advice for filmmakers and all that, like who mostly work with live action stuff, and then you could give like a little tidbit of like just some kind of something that you've found helpful as well for that, but I'll kick us off. You do that, and then I'll wrap us up here. So for my fellow filmmaking people, I would highly recommend getting an understanding of animation. I think most editors that I have met don't know, basically, like they don't have any knowledge of animation to speak of, and even if they've done like a little bit of text here or there, they don't necessarily know like the elements of like the principles of animation, of squash and stretch, all that kind of thing. So if you're an editor, it's not it's animation is a different thing, but it's not an impossible leap to just know about, like learn about how it technically how it works. But I'd also say filmmakers, where if you want to have a gig at any level with this stuff, whether you're making your own short films or you have a more steady, like bigger fold, you're doing commercials, or you want to make the big pictures, you got to understand that there's a lot of CG out there in even the biggest Hollywood films that looks really bad, particularly the climax. And there's a couple reasons for that. And one of them is because a lot of directors out there don't know a lot about animation. And so they basically throw stuff at an animation department and say, hey, do all this, but they don't give them stuff that the animators are really that doesn't favor them being able to work with it well, And so to make your work look better across the board, it's best to understand how you can help these make it all work together. That's the gig. And the other reason why sometimes it can look bad is because they rewrite the ending and have to cram it in at the end or whatever. But point is, if you do live action filmmaking, look, just learn something about animation, particularly compositing. If you do live action and you want to have a spaceship land in there, you want to know how that can work. Like if you need to set up tracking markers, and even like whether you're just learning on YouTube or starting to work with an animator and have them involved in the writing process, okay? Or even just like when you're setting up shots and all that, like all that communication. So I'd say live action filmmakers, this stuff pertains to you, even if you don't want to animate anything. Helps a lot. It's helped me. It helped my imagination to go in directions that it would not have been possible. And I can think about things now that before that I wouldn't have been capable to. And so it has helped me creatively to expand my ideas and enhance my skill set and make my projects or just the work that I do better, frankly. Long story short, even if you don't do animation, if you work around it, know about it. Boom. Cool. Neat. Awesome. Not too profound, but still true.
Yes.
Maria,
definitely.
You've had plenty of time to think.
Yes, I have. Mine would be more for people who are like studying animation right now or have like just gotten out of school for animation or thinking about it, anything with animation. Is that don't worry if you're kind of unsure about animation. Like if there's like one thing that you don't necessarily like about animation, don't make that your main worry of, oh, I won't be able to get a job if I don't like do this thing, or I can't do every single little thing. No. Find what you're good at, and once you find what you're good at, like, run with it. Yeah, and don't try to change, like, what you like to do. Because if you try to change what you like to do, you're not really going to like doing it. So that's pretty much my main advice. And even if, like, you end up, like, getting a degree in animation or you have one, don't worry about getting a job in the animation industry. Like there's so many different options. Like we said, like it doesn't just have to be being in LA and working for an animation studio. It could be for Studio Me, like as a plug. Like it doesn't have to be so cut and dry as, oh yeah, the animation industry. No, there are other options for you. Like if you feel like you have the talent, but you can't really get in, try other places. If you try going for like a designer position, because you never know, you might have to use your animation skills to do certain designs. You just never know. So yeah, my main point is just don't worry if you don't love the whole process of animation. Because even if there's like one thing you like with it, run with it, and you'll get to where you want to go. So that's my advice.
Well, fantastic. Well, I think this has been a pretty cool episode. It's a bit more. It was really cool to have someone actually here, to talk to. We've been doing Zoom stuff for a while, even though I think that's, a really great setup we have, but it is really nice to have someone here to talk to. Thanks for co-hosting / guesting, all that stuff with me today.
You are very welcome.
Awesome. And I think that, we'll probably have you on again at some point, or maybe you'll host one of these sometime, it can theoretically happen.
Maybe.
But
I don't know how well I'd do, but Well,
the bar's, pretty high. I'm kidding. But yeah, so it's been great talking with you about some stuff in a way that other people might listen, and if not, it's just been another joy to just talk with you again about things that we're passionate about, and to hopefully put a little bit of hope out there for people who like something that often starts with dreams, which can often be disillusioned, but in the end, it's like, hey, there's actually a lot that you can do with this.
Yes.
Like you said, having a thing that you're good at, running with it. Maybe you don't like drawing a lot. Guess what? 3D animation is out there for
3D
you.
animation.
And,
3D. I know a lot of people who can't draw, and they are amazing 3D modelers.
There we go. Or even, and if you don't like modeling or rigging, it's like maybe you just want to animate characters. It's like, hey, that's a job too.
That's a
Somebody's
job.
got to do it,
Yes.
and it may as well be you.
Yes.
So, awesome. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we hope to see you next time on the StudioMEcast here at Studio Me. And hey, if you're looking to book something, why don't you go to our website at studiome.me. Thanks a lot. We have studio space, equipment to rent, and all kinds of stuff. So, or just stop in for a free tour. Have a good day. Thank you.